Nick Gauntlet, Private Knight, by Austin McKinley, Chapter 1. It was the 20th of August, the day I rode through the gates of Acre for the last time as a knight. 1191, Anno Domini, another helping of chaos and paranoia. We'd been sending boys to that meat grinder in the Near East as long as anyone could remember. War was damn near unwinnable, you ask me. Acre, you may recall, was a port city in the dominions of Saladin and Palestine, and one of the bloodiest battles in the entire conflict. Crusader army under King Guy of Jerusalem had squatted outside the city walls in the blazing desert heat going on 2 years by then. I'd arrived with King Richard's army in a fleet of more than 100 ships, and joined the siege with King Philip of France slightly over 2 months prior. Didn't give a damn about the Holy Land. I just wanted to render my mandatory service and get back to my wedding before my feudal lord thought better of the arrangement. Countless times we knocked holes in those dusty towers and blackened stone barriers, but Saladin always counterattacked. Even so, within a month of our arrival, the city was ready to surrender, and now our banner and Philip's joined the kingdom of Jerusalem's atop the battered ramparts. Those are the gates. Gates I'd helped breach. The guards hold open for me, and my squire Marcus and I return from Saladin's camp with news for the king. We dismount, and Marcus takes charge of the horses. You should have seen my armor back in those days, blood-smeared and bristling with weaponry improvised gadgets. I'd acquired a copy of the Banu Musa brothers' Book of Ingenious Devices in Cyprus, don't ask me how, and spent the rest of the sea voyage incorporating as many of their ideas as I could turn to practical use. I had a sponge in my visor to protect me from the fumes of burning cities, and these knives that would spring out of my... Anyway, that's how I got the nickname. I'm battle-worn, dirty, with a crew cut and stubble, pretty much how I look now, except slightly less jaded. I passed dozens of chained Saracen prisoners, the town's Muslim garrison we'd taken captive after the surrender, on my way to the Great Hall. An aide announces me, "Sir Nicholas of Gloucester," as I clank toward the dais where King Richard slouches on a makeshift throne. He's tall, pale, etched with sun and illness. Blue eyes, red beard and hair. Good-looking guy, in a French sort of way. He sits up. "Gauntlet, were your negotiations successful?" I remove a sealed letter from my glove, give it to Richard. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. Saladin has raised the necessary ransom monies, and he's willing to pay, but still refuses to surrender the nobles you demanded in exchange." "The Saracen dog?" "You ask me," I say. "He's trying to bottle us here in the port. Knows we can't advance with hostages in tow." "He's delayed long enough." Richard turns to me and says, "Kill the prisoners. Kill all of them and prepare the men to move." "Your Highness, no." It's out before I know it. "What did you say, Gauntlet?" Richard's voice is cold. "Sire, Saladin's been a noble opponent, chivalrous in all his dealings with us. We can't betray the terms of surrender." In truth, I had grown to admire the man. I had come expecting animals and found instead a courteous and civilized people, besides ferocious fighters. "If he doesn't value the men of this city," growls Richard, "why should we? Teach him not to trifle with the armies of Christ." "But sire, the garrison numbers almost 3,000. I can't. I won't kill all of them." "This is treason, Gauntlet. Give me your sword." I back away, horrified. Sweat stands out on my face. This from a king I had fought with, supped with, defended when ill. But that's how it was. Crusade changed a man. What we saw there was not like any European warfare we'd ever experienced. That's the only apology I can make for Richard. "Your sword, Gloucester," Richard repeats. I spring a catch on my scabbard and my sword leaps into my hand. Another tidbit from the Book of Ingenious Devices. I'll admit, I don't hand my sword over easily, but after a moment's hesitation, I give it to my king. "Sir Nicholas of Gloucester," he says, "I hereby revoke your title and all the rights, lands, and privileges thereto. You are no longer knight of this crusade. Guards." A gesture from Richard, the guards grab me. If he cares so much for the heathen garrison, he can share their fate. Bring me a knight who will follow my orders. He breaks my sword over his knee. I can still hear the brittle pin that might as well have been my life, snapped in two. The guards led me to the courtyard in chains. My squire Marcus follows at a distance. They open a heavy iron door and try to push me through with the rest of the Muslim garrison. When their backs are turned, Marcus rushes up and clobbers them with a cast iron pan from our field kit. He drops like a sack of turnips. "Marcus?" I say, startled. "I'm with you, my lord," says he. I brace my foot against the stone frame of the ironworks and shove. The guards stagger back, my hands still in chains. I trip a switch, and knives they failed to confiscate spring from my heavy armored gloves and boots. I whirl and kick at my captors. Marcus and I overpower the guards and run for the city gate. Some 300 of the Saracen prisoners get loose too, which helps cover our escape. We belt out of the city. Calls from the towers and arrows fly at our heels, strike men to either side of us. We dodge them, keep running up the dusty slope of a dry, scrubby hill overlooking Acre. We pause in the cover of a pile of tumble-down stones to stare in horror at the city. All told, more than 2,700 men were decapitated over the next 2 days, but Marcus and I aren't among them. From our vantage point, we can hear the screams of the condemned prisoners. I couldn't go back to my feudal lord. Couldn't marry his daughter now that I was a disgraced knight. I lost everything that day. Maybe not as much as the garrison at Acre, but still, quite a lot. "What's the plan, Nick?" Marcus asks me. "There's no plan here," says I. "Only madness." We melt into the wilderness and eventually made our way back to England. It's 12:08 now. Richard is dead, and John's in charge, not that it's an improvement. Here at the Lady of the Lake Tavern, Cadmia, the barmaid, serves us our nightly ales. It's a roadhouse for peasants. The mud and timber walls reverberate with noise, and my nostrils reverberate with body odor, but it's pleasant enough. In the years since our return, Marcus has applied himself, become a successful blacksmith, and well, these days, my main opponent is my liver. I sit on my stool with my grizzled leather fedora and makeshift necktie tucked into my mail and tunic, and stare at a well-oiled steel broadsword which hangs above the bar. I think it belonged to Cadmia's father, and remember the day it all turned to shit. That's how it was, I say. How it's always been. "Take it easy, Nick," says Cadmia. "I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" I tip my hat. "An usurper king in a bankrupt country? You already got trouble, Tootie. Don't look my way." It was Marcus's nickname for her, a blacksmith's joke, something to do with the sublimation of zinc. I don't really understand it. Marcus liked to give people nicknames. He gave me mine. It's usually about this time Warren, or someone like him, a big side of local farm boy beef, backed by two equally huge towny friends, leans onto the bar by my elbow. "Might watch what alehouse you loose your tongue in, lowlife," he says. "My father fought with our Duke in the Crusades." "Then your father was a fool," says I, and knock back the last of my ale. Marcus sees where this is headed, says, "Well, I have an early shoeing." He stands up, leaves his ale untouched. "No, Marcus, wait," I say. "These serfs lack education." Marcus holds me at arm's length. "I can't keep doing this, Nick," he says. "I have a business to run. You don't want to help, that's fine, but Smithy isn't going to black itself." I give a sullen nod and complete the thought. "That's right," he says. "Come with me. Got a new project I want to show you." I don't listen. I should listen. Should go with him. But I don't. "Think I'll stay," says I. "Suit yourself," says Marcus. He eyes Warren. "Better make it plate." "It's been a few years, son." I round on Warren. "So you may not know, but before the King's Crusade there was the Wendish Crusade. And before that, the Siege of Jerusalem. Even then it was more about politics than heretics. I'd have done my duty to the king if I'd been of age. says the beef. Give it a year. You'll get your chance. They'll keep going as long as they can find fools to follow him. Warren growls. Cadmia says, Oh, Nick. A good night to you all, says Marcus, and beats it, leaving me to the tender mercies of the townies. Marcus, wait. I start, but Warren grabs my shoulder. I'll teach you to insult my father, you... I whip my collapsible, pistol-gripped crossbow from my shoulder holster, arrow tipped to Warren's nose. Finish that pejorative, I tell him. Nick, I said no bows! Cadmia all but screams. I ignore her, too. Go on, I say to Warren. I'm Nick Gauntlet, son. Who are you? Warren makes a threatening lunge. I flinch, pull the trigger. The bolt shoots off sideways as the crossbow flies apart. Warren laughs as I glare at the pistol grip in annoyance. Should take better care of your livery, squire, he says, and punches me in the face. Warren and his friends toss me into the street and throw the pieces of my crossbow after me. Horses stand tied in the muck. Cadmia lingers in the doorframe, where a weathered sign reads, Lady of the Lake, and holds my leather trench coat. I stagger to my feet, ready for more. Let it go, tough guy, she says, or I'll tell Sheriff Railgar you've been fighting. But Tutty, says I, it was the right thing to do. We gotta stand up for what's right. Glad to see you're not bitter, says Cadmia. That'd be pathetic. She helps me on with my coat, straightens my tie. What are you doing to yourself, Nick? She says. Everybody knows your story, why you're not a knight anymore. But it was 17 years ago. You don't have to take it out on them night after night. The world's a disloyal master, Tutty, I say. Too much ale tends to make me philosophical. It'll refuse you what you deserve and punish you even if you do the right thing. Go home, says Cadmia. Sleep it off. That's what you're best at. How about one for the road? I ask. She gives me a sad look, slams the door. I glare at the horses who eye me, stoical. I used to have a horse. Fine one. I wonder whatever happened to him. Probably got eaten a little later in King Richard's campaign if his luck went anything like mine. What are you looking at? Says I. I stagger past the wooden arrow on the outskirts of the village and splash through the squalid street towards the low-rent tower on the bad side of the burg where I kip. Calomel's a crappy little dukedom in the East Riding of Yorkshire, whose name I've changed to protect the innocent. It's a backwater, and that suits me fine. Since Marcus moved in, it had the best blacksmith in 3 counties, which is all I need. At the top of the crumbling spiral stair, I unlock the door to my one-room flop. Built into the door, a stained glass window, one of the fancy leaded kind Marcus likes to make. Frames a brass placard reads, Nick Gauntlet, Private Knight. Another of Marcus's little jokes. My place betrays me, I guess. In the tower room, I pass a mounted disc. Map of the world up to the point where there be dragons on one side and a relief of the underworld on the other. Bound tomes and gadgets from the book of ingenious devices I've constructed with Marcus's help line the walls. A casual inventor and scholar, a man of steel and letters whose hard times have lasted too long to be coincidence. That's me. I sit behind my wooden writing desk and pile the pieces of my broken crossbow atop it. I open a drawer and tip the remains of a bottle to my lips, but it's empty. I briefly consider passing out on the hay pile that serves as my mattress and the respite of unconsciousness, but I'm too keyed up, sore, and swiftly sobering as a result of the beating I took. There's only one thing to do when I feel this way. I gather up the bits of my bow, pound back down the tower steps into the street, and head for the smithy. Marcus's blacksmith shop is a 2-story structure, living quarters above the forge and workshop, lined with the leaded glass windows Marcus likes to make. Marcus! I bellow at the upper window. Damn thing fell apart again. Are you sure the Chuka Nu is better than the Palobolus as a basis for a collapsible bow? We talked about this. The Palobolus, a kind of chain-driven Greek repeater, had been my suggestion, but Marcus preferred a Chinese variety with lever action and a composite recurved bow for more power. Less moving parts, less to go wrong in theory. But once the thing was sprung, it was a bitch to put back together. My weaponry was a continual project, one of the few things Marcus and I still had in common. As civilians, we aren't allowed to carry swords, but that doesn't mean we like to go unarmed. "Marcus!" I call again. "Quiet in the street!" someone shouts from a neighboring building. "Shut it, you," says I. "I need a smithy, not a smartass." As I look for the source, a cloaked figure bolts from the workshop, knocks me aside. "Whoa there," I say, and look up just in time to see an explosion blow out Marcus's fancy glass. Flames and smoke pour out of the stone building. I kick my way in, find Marcus blackened and near death amid the flaming debris. "Marcus!" I shout and gather him up. He has massive acid burns, his face is falling apart. He begins to convulse. "Marcus! Jesus!" His eyes drift around and find me. "The head," he says faintly, blood gurgling in his lungs. "It was the head." He dies, and I hold his body in my arms as the smithy burns. "Oh, Marcus. Damn it," I say. And in one of those crisis confusions, those times where everything feels so unreal you begin to doubt your own eyes, I see it. A concealed door, half open behind the forge, that to my knowledge had never existed before.